So welcome everybody to this panel where we will introduce and discuss the guide that we're launching today, which is a practical guide to implementing responsible research assessment at research performing organisations. My name is Rebecca Lawrence. I'm Vice Chair of DORA. My day job is as Managing Director of F1000, which is an open research publisher. And I've been working as part of the DORA steering board for the last 4 to 5 years. This is the second of 3 online launch events, and we're really excited today to hear from the panelists that we have from across Africa and the European regions about the status of how to implement responsible research assessment in our different environments. So the goal is that we all leave here today with both a better understanding of the issues around responsible research assessment and of DORA's new guide and in how that might be able to help you in taking some concrete actions in your own environments. So the plan for the session today, I will briefly introduce DORA and the guide, and then we'll hear from our speakers about their reflections on how they see responsible research assessment in their environments and how they think the guide might be used here. And we'll close with a few questions from you. So before I introduce the speakers, a few housekeeping rules. We are in meeting formats, so please do keep your mics off. But if possible, please do keep your videos on. It'll make it a much more engaging environment than having everybody off screen. Please do note the meeting is being recorded, and we will share the recording after the event and promote it more widely as well. Generally, please feel free to use the chat function throughout the event for relevant comments, for questions, and also if you've got any resources of things that you've done or used to implement responsible research assessment in your country or in your institution, please do share that in the chat because it will be invaluable to others in this session, and we will share those more broadly at the end. We will open for questions after the presentation and some of the panel discussion. So please do keep them coming. Please add them as and when. And Giovanna, who's with us, will help us review those and bring as many as we can to the panel. So with me today managing the meeting is Giovanna Lima. She is our program manager for DORA, who joined us a few months ago and is doing an excellent job in coordinating all of this and is running around behind the scenes supporting us today. As I say, she'll keep an eye on the chat and she'll help me with a Q&A session. But also if you experience any technical issues, please just message Giovanna directly in the chat. So now I'll begin introducing you to our panelists. So we have 3 esteemed panelists here. Firstly, we have Emmanuel Boakye, who's a passionate African open science champion dedicated to promoting reproducible and open research practices and improving research culture across Africa. He's founder and co-director of the African Reproducibility Network, which is a community-led organisation with over 350 members from more than 150 African institutions in 30+ countries across the 5 African regions. Emmanuel's worked on multiple projects and programmes with several pro-open science organisations and initiatives locally and globally, which include with the Association of African Universities, Centre for Open Science, PreReview, Asset Bio, and many others. Professor Dr. Henk Kummeling has been a professor at the Institute of Constitutional and Administrative Law of the Utrecht University since 1995. In 2015, Utrecht University awarded him a distinguished university professorship in comparative constitutional law. Since 2013, he's also extraordinary professor at the University of Western Cape in Cape Town. And he has chaired the State Committee on Rule of Law established by the Cabinet, Parliament and Judicial Branch in response to political scandals that harmed public trust. He's held various positions internationally, such as being member of the Administrative Board of the International Association of Universities, chairman of the steering board of Coalition for Advancing Research Assessment, better known as CoARA, and has served as Utrecht's University's Rector Magnificus from 2018 to 2025 and was awarded the University's Medal for Outstanding Service, in particular for promotion of open science and building bridges between universities around the world. Dr. Andiswa Mfengu is a senior lecturer and deputy head of department in the Department of Knowledge and Information Stewardship at the University of Cape Town in South Africa. She holds a PhD in Library and Information Science from the same university and is emerging scholar in the area of research impact assessment, focusing on developing a more holistic framework for such assessment relevant to transformative and decolonizing contexts. She's the immediate past chair of the African chapter of the Association for Information Science and Technology, past vice chair of the Library Education and Training Institutions section of the African Library of Information Associations and Institutions, and a member of the Scientific Advisory Board for EBI and Europe PubMed Central, and has received the prestigious South African National Research Foundation funded Black Academics Advancement Programme Fellowship for 2021. So before we begin with the panel discussion, I will share a little bit about DORA and the guide that we are sharing today. So I will bring up my screen. Okay. So just a little bit about DORA, give you a little bit of context about it. So DORA's mission is to advance practical and robust approaches to research assessment globally. And the focus is across all different scientific and scholarly disciplines. The original declaration actually has 18 recommendations for all the different key stakeholders within the ecosystem. So funders, institutions, publishers, etc. And has three core themes. One is around moving away from journal-based metrics as a surrogate measure of quality. One is thinking more broadly about the value and impact of a much broader range of research outputs. And then it's also about, being explicit about what criteria are being used around hiring and promotion and tenure decisions. And there's a huge number of both individuals and organisations that have now signed the declaration, showing real broad buy-in around the sort of core principles sitting behind it. And really our mission falls into four key areas. So raising awareness in the first place that there even is an issue. Secondly, helping to facilitate implementation, either through aiding development of new policies or practices around hiring or promotion and funding decisions, as well as catalysing change, so spreading reform more broadly by working across the scholarly disciplines and globally, and then improving equity, so calling for a much broader representation of researchers in the design of research assessment practices. As part of DORA, more recently, having moved more from being a declaration and a set of signatories to being much more of an active initiative to try and drive and support change and reform around research assessment, DORA obtained a grant from Arcadia Foundation with the aims of developing a whole suite of different tools to support organisations in advancing towards research assessment. So one of the biggest ones that we've done most recently is the Reformscape, which is a big searchable database of case studies and exemplars of different types of organisations around the world and what they've done around reforming research assessment. So it enables you to find an organisation like you in a similar situation and what did they do and how did they go about it. We've also developed a whole set of tools and frameworks within there to help think about different scenarios and different issues it might be trying to tackle. And we also ran a survey to get a sense of, well, where are we currently? The sort of big key final piece that's come out of that piece of funding is this practical guide that we're launching today, which is focusing on how do we implement responsible research assessment. In the emails that we've sent around, we've sent the link to it, but the link's here too, or please do use the QR code and download. It is also citable, so it has a DOI in Zenodo. So what's the purpose of the guide? The purpose is that we, often hear organizations say, okay, yeah, we understand the issue. We recognize that there's a need to start to think about different ways of research assessment, but where do we start? It's such an overwhelming thing to do, in some regards, that it's actually quite hard to think about what's the first step that you can take. And we were hearing this a lot, and this is why we've put together this guide to try and help give suggestions of where you might start and what you might do. So it's a bit of a sort of one-stop shop. This one's particularly targeting research performing organizations. And it's a series of practical tips of things that you can do, various different activities, as well as intervention points, and linked to those real examples and case studies that I mentioned that we have sitting within Reformscape. So you can go and see, well, what did others do? And then a whole series of resources. So we co-developed this via workshop back in January in Washington, D.C. We brought together about 35 leadership, particularly from research performing organizations, as well as funders and policymakers. And sort of started by thinking about, what have organizations done so far around, particularly in research institutions, around reforming research assessment, and then looking at the guide that we'd already started to draft and got a lot of reflections and a lot of input, really valuable input on thinking about how best to structure it and how best to make it accessible, because the idea is that you can dip in and dip out. It's not, you start at the beginning and go to the end. The idea is you grab the bit that's relevant, which may be in the middle or wherever, and that it's in a really easily digestible form, and also that it's not yet another great big huge document that nobody can wade through because there's just too much text in there. So we spent quite a lot of time thinking about how to actually structure it as well. Really good team behind it. Obviously, the co-chairs, vice-chairs. We had some implementation experts helping us think about it as well, particularly around how we structure it. We had valuation experts helping with the authorship as well, and obviously the sort of broad DORA team. So what's in the guide? So there are 4 core color-coded sections, which hopefully also make it quite easy to navigate around and understand where you are within it. Focusing around, a broad introduction as to a background about responsible research assessment, a set of key activities, a set of key moments, and then some links to global initiatives. So the introductory chapter really gives that sort of holistic view of research impact, the importance of valuing quality over quantity, equitable opportunities for researchers, and links to some of the resources that we've already created to give you that sort of general background of what are the issues and what are we trying to do here. The second chapter is really key chapter. It has 9 different types of activities that you can do within there. And each of them give an idea of the different sort of approaches with some practical tips, as well as some reflective questions that you might want to think about. So, if you're convening a working group, thinking about what sort of people you might want in there, the sort of buy-in you might want from other parts of the organization, all of those things. So just sort of things to have in the back of your mind as you're doing these. As I mentioned, we link out to relevant examples and case studies so you can see, well, what have others done? How did they do it? Maybe go and reach out to them and talk to them about it, and links to other relevant resources as well. Chapter 3 then focuses on, well, what are the key moments in research assessment that are good intervention points? So it can help to sort of think about, where might we want to focus in the first instance and to start making some progress. And as you can probably see from the image there, a lot of this is actually a whole set of sort of tables and menus of options of what we've seen other institutions doing across the world in tackling that key moment. And then the fourth chapter really tries to help flag up other global initiatives that are aligned with the responsible research assessment. So yeah, we all know there's a whole raft of different initiatives going on, and leadership are going to be challenged by all these different groups and initiatives coming at them. And so the idea here is, suggesting that it may be beneficial to actually link up with some of these, whether it's, about trying to drive uptake of open science or try to, figure out how to get a more holistic, inclusive view of research, all of those kind of initiatives. And so it highlights a number of the major ones. It's obviously not comprehensive, but some of the major ones that you might want to think about. As part of this, really excited that we're also launching 3 new case studies that have been created as part of Project DORA. So we have one from Tokyo University, which was actually about how they signed DORA and how they got buy-in from the leadership more generally, and how they and not just the leadership but also the broader community around the organization. We have one from Aalborg University Hospitals, which is a sort of whole institution approach and thinking about how to link responsible research assessment to the strategic goals of the university and its direction. And then one from the University of Calgary, which is sort of a high-level institutional implementation and how they got buy-in across the various different faculties and units. So with that, I will stop sharing and we will move on to our panel. So please do share questions in the chat if you haven't already. And in the meantime, we will start with a bit of a discussion. And maybe a good place to start, maybe I can start with you, Andiswa, is thinking about sort of what experiences you've had in terms of moving towards implementation of responsible research assessment. Maybe thinking from the sort of South African research system perspective, and also what sort of challenges have you faced in trying to do some of this?
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much, Rebecca, for that question. I think maybe just to provide a bit of context, as Rebecca has mentioned, so my background is in higher education. So I come from a university, and my interest has always been looking at around across universities, across disciplines. How can one assess research in a more equitable way, in a holistic way, and so on? And I think, I mean, if one were to draw, there's been lots of challenges, so which I don't think they're unique to South Africa, where there is no buy-in, or there's actually not even there is no urgency or acknowledging that there is a need. The broader community, you've got professors that have benefited from the quantitative metrics which we're trying to move away from, where then there is a challenge of the research community, higher education leadership, where there is actually almost, there's no incentive from actually, I guess, working on the reform or trying to reform how we do things. And I think that has been a biggest challenge. There's been lack of buy-in, there's been lack of advocacy. And I think this is understandable because we've worked with the quantitative metrics, we've worked with the rankings for a long time. And another challenge is that our governments, they subsidize, especially in South Africa, there's funding subsidy in terms of quantitative aspects of research, where the more you publish, the more money the universities are getting and funding and so on. So then almost there's 2 systems that we're hoping to run parallel, but they're contradictory, where also our values are not aligning with how we assess researchers, promotion, tenure, and so on, and funding is actually allocated across the university. So I think then, I mean, when one looks at then with responsible research assessment, I think that's a good guide in terms of the focus and the holistic view that it's taking, which I think a lot of us as researchers on the ground, we've seen the inequities that are actually in the quantitative metrics, and also being able to use the guide, which provides a balanced and broad approach, and moving beyond the narrow focus on quantitative indicators, but also then trying to get governments university leaders and advocating and buying in, and also supporting this move and change that I think as researchers on the ground, we're looking at more open, fair criteria that is non-discriminatory in terms of the practices, which I think that a lot of it we're still holding on to what used to work and what is incentivized by our governments and different spaces and so on. So I think that's more or less, I'll probably leave it in there, and anything else maybe touch on later. Thanks, Rebecca.
Thank you very much, Andiswa. Lots of great points there. I wonder, Henk, in terms of, that issue about thinking about how you influence within the country system as well. I don't know whether you have experience from having been rector at Utrecht University for a number of years now and really been proactively reforming research assessment there, whether your sort of experience of some of those challenges and how one gets around it.
Yeah, well, I completely relate to what Andiswa has been saying. I think that I had the same experience also in the Netherlands, and I think it's really about thinking about what are we there for as research institutions, and what do we want to achieve also for our society especially. And if you take that into account, gradually we came also in the Netherlands and also in our university to the conclusion that the old metric system was simply not helping. So we really had to think about other ways to perform and to make, let's say, other assessments of quality and the impact of what we are doing. And I think that really took off in the Netherlands, but also in other parts in the world, and also in Europe, and recognizing that we had to change our behavior in order to be more relevant to society, but also to scholarship and science, and making, let's say, science more relevant as well for society. So that also implied that we really changed our research assessment systems in general, also in the Netherlands. But it was really about thinking real hard about what are we there for, what do we want to achieve, what is our mission, what are our goals, and what are our values. And I think that coming back to these types of discussions, it really was helpful that we really came to the conclusion, okay, we have to change. Really, we have to change.
And how did you get buy-in at a national level for that? Because it's one thing to change as a university, but as Andiswa says, if you're stuck within a system where your funding, for example, is influenced by a certain system, then how have you sort of got any thoughts about how one influences at a more national level to shift in thinking?
Yeah, but I think that what Andiswa was saying is also crucial. You have to organize yourself a buy-in from the leadership. At one point in time, all rectors in all universities in the Netherlands, and also the important directors and leaders of our research institutions, came to the same conclusion. We really have to change this model. And then we went collaboratively to our political leaders, to the ministers, and said, well, when it comes to subsidies, when it comes to grant systems, when it comes to the budgeting of universities and research performing organizations in the Netherlands, you really have to change. And yeah, well, it took a lot of years, it took a lot of time and effort, but I think the leadership in that area was really crucial to organize the change.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Emmanuel, I wonder, your sort of role in setting up and leading the African Reproducibility Network has obviously given you a really great Pan-African viewpoint. So I'm curious what you feel are sort of resources that are needed for responsible research reform more generally across the African region.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rebecca. You can clearly see that trying to reform how researchers are assessed is very daunting.
You're breaking up a little bit, I should say. It might be worth taking your video off to see if that improves it.
Yeah.
Apologies. That's better.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah. So I think you can clearly see that trying to reform research assessment is a very daunting task. It's not easy trying to do it, and you definitely also have to do it from the top to the bottom. And unlike, let's say, open science advocacy, where you can start at the grassroots level and etc., when you really want to reform research assessment, you have to get that buy-in for it to be greenlit. And the question that would always come up is that who are the people that are going to handle this? It's a question that would always come up because institutions at any time have priorities and they know that everything that needs to happen, you need to have people that will take on the tasks that are supposed to be done. And this is one of the major issues that are happening, right? We don't have the people that are going to be the change makers, the leaders, the advocates for these changes at the institution. And I think it's one of the biggest hurdles that is there. And if we're able to get this local champion, people can say, okay, we want to do this, we are ready to do this, then that is ticked off the box of who are the people going to do this. Then you go to the time commitment, because even if someone is a researcher at the institution, you can clearly see that researchers generally have a lot on their plate, generally, trying to do research, trying to do the teaching aspects of things. So the question comes up, would the people have time? And would it be taken out of, let's say, their normal work time, or are they going to be given extra time to do some of these things? And then the question is, if they are going to give extra time, are they going to be remunerated for it? Is there going to be money apportioned to this extra work they are going to do? And if there's going to be money needed for it, where is the money coming from? So these are all questions that will come up that could eventually become a blockade as to whether they are willing to do it or not. They may have the initial buy-in, right? But the question is, things need to be done. And these are all boxes that need to be ticked. And aside these two, institutions are always interested in the stakeholders that are involved. You want us to change how research are said. Who are the people that are also pushing for this? Are there major organizations out there? Do we have the major organizations in our country or across the continent that are also pushing for it? Can you cite examples as to this being a genuine general concern for institutions across the continent, or you just want us to do it because you think it's going to help us? Because generally, people kind of move according to how the systems work. I think Henk and Andiswa have said about how the systems influence change. So they want to know the stakeholders that are involved. So you need these people also on board. These are all resources that you need to have. Stakeholders being on board. And I firmly believe that if these boxes are ticked, when you tick these boxes and you are able to prove that you can sustainably support these things, institutions are more likely to greenlight a review of how they assess research as compared to if you just present that it's going to help and etc. But you can't tick these boxes, because even if they believe it's going to help, you need these resources in. You need people who actually do all the work. I think that the guide was talking about establishing a working group, a task force. And this is definitely something that is extensive. They have to review existing policies, look at the guide, see what needs to be done, what needs to be done first. And this is a lot of work, right? And I'm sure that when you tick these boxes, it makes it a lot easier for the management and institutions. Okay, yeah, you are ready to get this done, so we will let you handle this. Unless these boxes are ticked, I think there would always be that blockade because they have priorities. If the institution has money, it has priorities already that is pushing the money into. So you may not be ready to easily push it into this. So I think we need to look at how all of these boxes are ticked, how we can get people that are well-trained, that are passionate about the change in how researchers are assessed, how we can get money in to fund some of these things, and how we can ensure that we have the major stakeholders across these various continents or research communities also actually buying into some of these things. And I think it's going to really help us achieve the kind of thing that we are looking for here.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Emmanuel. And I guess related to that is, there often are sort of single champions. They may be early career researchers, they may be more senior, but often feel sort of overwhelmed because they feel like they're sort of a single individual, and how could they possibly try and make anything happen? I wonder, to all of you really, if you have thoughts about what advice we might give or how we might be able to sort of help support each other as a community to support those that are keen at those sort of single champions within an organization to, feel like they can actually make some change.
Yeah, I think this is exactly one of the issues that ARIN has been trying to solve across the continent by building our local network lead group. We realized that championing things can be so tough, especially when you feel alone. And when we had discussions with some of our community members from the library working group, they shared insights as to how they would have wonderful training sessions about how they can influence change within their communities. But then they go back and it feels like it is them against the whole institution. And this can be really, really difficult. So if you have a group of well-knit, well-connected people that are kind of bound by shared goals, I think that is something that we successfully achieved through our training program, where we have this group of people who fully believe it, the need for that change. And they are there to support each other. They are there to learn from each other. The last time we had a meeting, people were saying, oh, I have challenges in my institution. And someone was like, oh, okay, we are in the same country. This is how we solve that problem. And it made it a lot easier, right? So I think if we could have that community of practice, I remember you brought this up in our previous discussion. If we have that community of practice where people can support each other and say, okay, we encountered this problem, but this is how we went around. Or we even discovered this funding opportunity that is able to support the people that are invested in this thing. It makes it a lot easier, like it's as compared to one person taking on the whole world. And one thing we always advised our local network leads is that start from your peers and get them to get involved. In that way, if you get institutional buy-in, you already have a group of people that are willing to work on this, right? You already have people that you can easily work on with this. So start from your peers. Get people that you believe want that change. People that you believe, if you say we want to form a working group or a task force, these people are already kind of prepared to do this thing. So that's an advice that we give to them. And it's been happening. We have some of them coming up with mini groups that are working on research assessments, and some of them working on how they're assessing open science awareness across the institution. And it makes it a lot easier as compared to one person taking on the task. So Rebecca, that's a wonderful point. And yeah, it will help to have that community of practice. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Henk and Andiswa, do you have thoughts about do you have communities of practice like that, or is this something that we need to figure out a way of putting together?
We do have them, and I think that the starting point would be that signing DORA and signing CoARA, these kind of things, has implications. Just yesterday I had a meeting with all the co-chairs and chairs from our working groups within CoARA, and they are really working on, let's say, practical, tools, practical guidance, and all the other things as well, and also relating to what the practical guidance DORA is doing. But the main constraints, of course, is time, and for a lot of people, and they're doing a great effort. They're quite eager to perform, to achieve all kinds of new things, organize infrastructure, platforms, and these kind of things. But they need the support from, let's say, the leadership of these research institutions to make it really possible. And therefore, we demand also from CoARA really a plan from the leadership, from the institution that's signing up within a year. What are you going to do? And how are you going to help? And I think that's also relevant for, let's say, the implementation of the and the way the practical guide of DORA is being used. You really have to make sure that also the leadership, the important people that allocate the resources and the time, take up their responsibility and make sure that they live up to their signing of the implication of the signing of DORA.
Absolutely. Andiswa, do you want to add?
Yes, maybe just to add, I think Emmanuel and Henk covered quite a lot of aspects, but I think from my side, just looking at communities of practice, I think communities are there, but what I've found in my own institution and institutions in South Africa, especially around universities with all our structures that have been built over years, is that we need champions. And here also the champions probably need to be more senior. I've seen how professors can have more impact than if myself as an early career, I try to advocate for responsible research assessment. And somehow, so a combination then in terms of looking at champions, you can have your directors of research that maybe then they will put funds towards this move and reform, but also you can have professors which are saying, I mean, they have quite a lot of clout in their discipline and can influence students, one is training and so on. And that top-down approach where resources are made available for this move and actually time for people to focus on more responsible practices and also how you assess them, but also then having professors, one can be able to influence in one's discipline in one space. So using champions, I guess a top-down and also bottom-up approach seems to actually get things moving than trying to use one approach, where you actually have a number of efforts that are working towards the same goal and championing for this reform rather than, and actually seeing how it can be done and how it can be beneficial for our communities. And because a lot of it, as Henk mentioned, it's a lot of change in behavior, change in how we've been doing things and how we've normalized certain things. And obviously that is uncomfortable. There's a lot of discomfort that one experiences in that case. Thanks, Rebecca.
Thank you very much. There's a really relevant question, or a couple of questions in discussion in the chat actually from Christine Stubendorf. I don't know, Christine, whether you actually just want to ask your question, unmute and ask your question directly, because I know there's been a bit of discussion in the chat around it.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, my video is not working.
Okay.
Well, it's essentially I'm thinking about like the role of funding bodies, you know, and as Andiswa also mentioned, is that this disconnect between what we are trying to do as DORA and also what I'm hearing when I'm discussing with especially early career researchers, but even also seniors in terms of how they would like this to work, in sort of how you assess real impact and, you know, and the quality of research. But ultimately, we're all working within this framework of like, well, these are the boxes you have to tick in order to get the money from the funding bodies. So I keep thinking like, well, we need to get like, you know, we need to get buy-in from funding bodies to get them to also understand that, you know, we need to move away from the box ticking and find a different, you know, more holistic approach to how do you assess the impact of researchers when you choose who to support. So I just wanted to like to ask you kind of like, well, how has DORA experienced this? You know, what is the feedback from funding bodies and governments, and what are your thoughts on this?
We'd like to take that. Henk, go ahead.
Yeah, well, there's in my view, a wonderful experience within the European Union. As you probably know, the European Research Council, which is responsible for the allocation of a lot of research funding. Not enough, of course, we say as institutions within Europe, but they're really responsible for the allocating of a lot of money. And when it comes to, let's say, the way they look at the for instance, applicants for individual grants, they really change their behavior. Mitigating from, let's say, the more prestigious indicators, metrics, etc. But now working on using narrative CVs. So I'm thinking more about the let's say, history and the potential, future potential of people. So that's really a major change in how the European Research Council, which is a major funding institution within Europe, is helping us moving in the right direction. And I think that a lot of other funding institutions also within Europe really want to follow suit. The same case for NWO, the National Research Foundation in the Netherlands, but I see it also in other national institutions. I think that the European Research Council really set a very good example.
Yeah, I mean, I know certainly from DORA, so we actually coordinate a funder community of practice, which is a very, very active and global community of funders who are all doing all sorts of different reforms. So I think there's actually, seems to me, quite a lot of interest and progress with a lot of research funders. And the point about narrative CVs actually is, we've got in that guide, we've got a whole section on narrative CVs and sort of highlighting some of the value around them. I know we have got FNR and Research Ireland in the room as well. So I don't know if either of you also want to comment on the question, or any other funders that are on the line.
I can jump in really fast. So I'm Sean. I work
Please
at the Luxembourg National Research Fund. We're a funder, main fund in research in Luxembourg, and involved in DORA and CoARA and all those sorts of things. And I mean, I speak for a bunch of funders that what Henk was saying before is correct. There are plenty of funders, especially in Europe, that are pushing towards this and really trying to kind of practice what they preach. If we sign DORA, if we sign CoARA, then we make the changes. The narrative CVs that Henk was talking about, there's over 15 institutions around the world, funders around the world, that implement this to move away from kind of metrics and stuff. And this is Europe, New Zealand, Chile, like not just focused here, right? And there's a lot of other work that's being done around this as well. I don't know if you want to add anything, Suze.
Yeah, no, thanks, Sean. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Yeah, so obviously, like FNR at Research Ireland, we have committed to DORA and CoARA, and obviously we're involved in many of the working groups and things. And I would say that from a funder's perspective, it can be just as difficult to sometimes get time and people resourcing to do a lot of the work, because obviously this, from a funding body perspective, we want to do it in such a way that we bring the community, the research sector along with us, and that it is a conversation and a collaboration, which obviously takes a mass amount of stakeholder engagement and those kind of things. So, but I think that, at least from a Research Ireland perspective, this is definitely the direction of travel. And we implemented the narrative CV, much like FNR did several years ago, and we're constantly iterating on it. And we hope to do more impactful things in terms of our functions as well, that maybe aren't as directly relevant to research reforming organizations, but I think can be linked in or joined up. And I think that some of that is like reviewing how we select peer reviewers and who is in the room and who is not in the room, and what are they assessing and the criteria. And I think that a way that research reforming organizations and funding organizations can kind of sync up possibly would be the like the hiring promotion process. If we could kind of align that with some of the funding initiatives that are, especially I'm much more familiar with the European context, that are developing, I think there are real synergies there, because I've heard a lot recently anecdotally from researchers being like, well, I have my narrative CV for funding, and then I have my real CV for hiring and promotion. And so that's obviously something that we can't mandate that a HR department at a university change their system, but hopefully we can open up the conversation and influence with that. So I know that was a lot of things thrown at you, but hopefully that was in some way helpful.
Yeah, no, very helpful. Thank you very much, Sean and Suze. Really appreciate it. I wonder, Emmanuel and Andiswa, whether you've got a perspective from funders in Africa, and what their sort of perspective is around this.
Thank you very much, Rebecca, for that. I think, in terms of reading around the space, we look up to Europe in terms of just the progress that has been made, where it's not just the universities advocating for this, but there's almost this collaborative approach that I think Henk spoke about, where universities have decided, and actually the funders mandated them or got, and there's some alignment in a way, which I think, even when you read around just the space, a lot of scholarship and case studies are coming from Europe, and we can only hope in Africa. I think in terms of our funding, we still have one CV. So there is no narrative CV that you need to put for anything. Everything is still very quantitative. And I think, I know from our fund, the National Research Foundation in South Africa, they have a framework that was now probably 3-4 years. And in theory, they do support, but obviously they haven't signed DORA. Same goes for my institution, because in practice, you have not aligned. You say you do the tick box and you say you agree and support, but in practice, you have not. So a lot of our funders, in theory, they do support the reform, but we've seen also in terms of when you apply for funding, when you apply for promotion, appointment, and so on, we're still doing what we were doing 10 years ago. And a lot of it, and I saw also just in the comments in terms of who is actually making those decisions from funding, the peer reviewers, the researchers, they're not on board. So at the end of the day, when you're applying, there's no robot that says, okay, this is our values. Are you aligning with them? No, it says, oh, how have we been allocating funding for the past whatever many years? And do you align? Have you published so many and so on? So there is a huge misalignment. And it's also, I think I understand where a lot of people, early career researchers are discouraged, because then you want to do all this great and responsible research. However, when you look at it at the end of the day, there is no recognition. We say one other thing and then we actually do something else. So there's a huge misalignment. And I think as Africa, there's a long way to go in terms of learning and I guess being part of those communities of practice and seeing how can we learn and how can we make our governments to actually push the funding to the right place. Because I don't think at times it's a funding issue, but it's actually prioritizing how we push and where we push the funding to, so that we can ensure things like a contribution to society. Because I think universities and research performing organizations, they exist because we would like to see contribution, the impact in our society and so on. Thanks, Rebecca.
Thank you, Andiswa. I'm going to move us on to another question, because we've got a number of questions in the chat, which is great, and some good discussion as well. So please all do read the discussion. Nuno Guimarães de Costa, I don't know whether you want to unmute and ask your question directly.
Okay, well, thank you, Rebecca. Well, my question. I'm in France, and here in France we have a huge competitive environment between business schools. I'm a research and impact responsible for in my school, and I really wanted to change the way things are done in my school, but we are an average school, and we face the problem of the rankings, the newspapers rankings that base the decision of students to join our schools. And so we have to get on top of those rankings if we want to be selected by students in this highly competitive environment. The problem is that the rankings today, and international rankings and especially French rankings, rely heavily on the quantitative metrics of publications. And so they look at the impact factors of journals, the number of stars of journals, or the rankings of the journals, which by themselves are in their own rankings, also looking only at quantitative criteria. So my question is, how can we overcome this? Being a small player in the market and not state-owned, so private schools, and in France, that's the best schools are the private schools in terms of management. And so how can we overcome this and really embrace the principles of DORA? Thank you.
Who would like to take that?
Yeah, well, as the ex-rector of the university that stepped out of some of these rankings, we simply do not deliver data anymore, as some other universities have also done. They made the same kind of a decision like Zurich, but also universities in Africa. I think that it really needs a collaborative effort and a collaborative understanding why these rankings are flawed. I think that we have to realize that each of us, our institutions have to deliver and have to act in a different context. When it comes to our missions, they are different. And these rankings have this idea that we all want to live up to the same kind of criteria, and therefore it's simply not helpful. If, for instance, when I was working with the University of Aruba over the last couple of weeks, that's a small island state. They have a different community. The university there has another responsibility than, for instance, my university has in Utrecht, and all your research institutions have. So, starting with this idea that you have to deliver, have your responsibilities in your own context, your own needs of the society where you act and you perform, then you know for sure that these rankings are not helpful. So I know for sure that, and there we really can help each other to make sure that all these research funders, also national governments, but also other institutions, really come to realize that these rankings are not helpful given the specific context that you work in. So well, rankings will be there as the weather for sure for decades to come, but we as a university, Utrecht University, but other universities as well, simply don't want to help them anymore to, let's say, give our data for free, to act for some of the ranking system as a commercial entrepreneur, to earn money with all these ranking systems. So therefore, I think we really have to join hands also within the context of DORA to create more awareness about what these rankings do, and in what sense some of these rankings are really not helpful in, let's say, performing for the society that we work in and work for.
Yeah.
Emmanuel.
Yeah, thank you so much, Henk. I think I can understand Nuno's concern, because the average person may not know these things that we are talking about. And like you were saying, it influences people's decisions to choose whether to come to an organization. And I'm sure that even getting people, researchers employed, this is something that will also influence them, because everyone wants to go to the highest ranked school. And the other side of the problem is that the institutions that get highly ranked would want to keep the system there. They wouldn't want to expose the deficiencies because it benefits them, right? So why would they change it? They have the metrics, they have all the data that they can submit to ensure that they are higher up there. So maybe has to be a collective effort by, by institutions that find themselves within the same predicament or problem that you and your institutions may experience, and to create a collective voice and let's like what Henk was suggesting. There are deficiencies there, so it would be good to create that collective voice, partner with organizations like DORA and foreign organizations that are trying to reform research assessment and bring these deficiencies out so that people would eventually know that this is not definitive. This does not clearly say that this institution is doing the best of research or is the quality of research organizations out there. So no, I think it has to start from there. You need to start having conversations among yourself, create a collective voice, align with organizations pushing for a change like DORA, and I think make people know. Because even if we have these discussions and a number of institutions say they are not going to submit their data like Henk was suggesting, people still don't know about these things if there is no collective voice out there. And the system is still going to influence how people decide to come to your institution and how, if you're employing people, how you can attract the best of researchers to your institution. I think create a collective voice. That would really make a lot of difference. Create a collective voice and then align with organizations like DORA, and I'm sure that you can achieve the thing that you want to achieve. Yeah.
Thank you, Emmanuel. Thank you, Nuno, for the question. One of the questions actually that came through the registration form when we asked people to register, we asked if people had questions, and one question that came through, Henk, that you might want to talk to a little bit is just about whether there's cooperation between DORA and CoARA, and we hear this question quite a lot, certainly on our side. I suspect you do on the CoARA side as well. I don't know whether you want to talk a little bit to it, and I can talk a little bit to it as well.
Yeah, well, as you said before, and it's great that in the practical guide that we are now applauding. There's a chapter in it that indeed says something about the major initiatives that we have all over the world with the same kind of mission, and I think that we have to be aware of the fact that we are working on a major cultural shift in academia and in general in research. That takes cultural shifts take a lot of time and effort, and it's great to see that a lot of, let's say, initiatives are there. There's a lot of dynamics needed to make sure that we go in the right direction. And I think you're quite right. I think that was one of the part of your, let's say, opening statement, Rebecca. That I think that we need some more collaboration within this amongst these institutions as well. And for now, I think it's great what I see what's happening there. Now DORA is offering a practical guide, and it's my experience that the more practical we become, and that's also my experience in DORA, in CoARA, we are having more toolkits, more platforms, more infrastructures. These are really helpful. So collaboration, but also making sure that we amongst ourselves organize new initiatives and organize these types of dynamics that is needed, support the people that are doing it, is really, really helpful. So when I look at DORA, I think that's great now that we have a worldwide, let's say, initiative and also a practical guide. And I think it's a great starters kit for a lot of institutions. And in CoARA, we are now working with working groups and national chapters on also parts of the implementation of what's also already there in the practical guide of DORA. But it takes a lot of time and effort. And I think working together and creating a better understanding what are the needs and what are the constraints in several systems. Yeah, I think it would be very helpful.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you, and I think you know, we're very keen to as DORA to collaborate CoARA with Claxofolek and Latin America. You know, there are many of these initiatives, and I think, as you say, this is such a big problem and a challenge that actually we're only going to succeed if we, you know, if we work collectively. It's a collective system problem. It's one of the reasons why it's so intractable, but we're only going to really succeed if we work together. And this is part of also the reason why we felt in the guide, and we got quite a lot of feedback about it actually when we ran the workshop, around also thinking about some of the other initiatives that aren't just in responsible research assessment, but are in some of the other areas that all feed into it, right? like Barcelona Declaration, or a lot of the open science initiatives, etc., which are all interlinked. And actually, the more we can work cohesively together, the more that also where we're each sort of going to leadership and saying, these are the issues that we need to think about, and also we need to put to I think it was Emmanuel that made the point earlier, we need to put resource and time behind addressing. The more we can think collectively about how we do that rather than having lots of separate initiatives, the more likely we are to make real progress. So yes, we absolutely, to that answer to that question, we absolutely are working together. I think we're doing slightly different, coming at it from slightly different angles, which is useful. So we're not, overlapping too much, or duplicating, I should say. But we are working actively also to think about how can we best support each other, given the strengths of the different initiatives. So we're coming towards the end now, so I think it's probably a good time for me just to kind of wrap up. It's been a great conversation. I've been delighted to see how much interaction we've had from the audience as well, and there's lots of great discussion there that we haven't been able to touch on, but thank you very much for that. Obviously, this is just the start of the trajectory for the guide. In terms of next steps, we're going to be actually working on creating a number of spin-out materials. So we're looking at creating some slide decks. A lot of people have said they want some one-pagers that are sort of they can more easily get in front of particularly leadership who aren't going to read a longer document. And also we're looking to create an interactive version. So at the moment we've just done a sort of flat PDF, but the idea is that you will be able to more easily online dip into the bits that you want as and when you want them. So if you haven't yet signed up for any of the newsletters or followed us on LinkedIn or Blue Sky, please do so, because that's a great way of keeping updated with as those new materials come out. We're also just generally really looking forward to keeping the conversation going with all of you. If you're interested in having these types of conversations within your research performing organisation, please do email us at info@sfdora.org. We'd be happy to introduce the guide to your university community. We've got a number of countries that are starting sort of independent communities of practice. I know that came up quite a lot in the discussion. To implement some of those changes, where obviously you can exchange good ideas and practice, and also just get some support from others around you and feel like you're not alone. So if you want help and assistance with thinking about some of that, again, let us know. And equally, if you've already made some progress with implementing responsible research assessment, or as you do so, hopefully, please let us know, because if you can share that with us, we can put these together as sort of case examples, and it means we can share them within Reformscape and link them to the guide. So it means others can learn from what you've done, and from what's worked and what hasn't worked. Because as we just said, that's the only way we're really going to make progress here. So also really hope to see you at, we've got a whole raft of different events. We're doing a number of events also within specific countries. So we've got one coming up in India on the 6th of June. I think Giovanna's hopefully going to put the registration link in the chat if she hasn't already. I just saw somebody saying in different languages. Yes, that is also something that we're thinking about, and thinking about different contexts. So while we've tried to be as non-descriptive and as broad as we possibly can within the guide, I think there are some scenarios and in different regions or countries where we may need to actually do a version of the guide that best suits there. We're also thinking about doing one for funders, maybe for publishers, so other communities as well. So we'll send an email with the guide and the various resources that people have shared in the chat around today. Welcome to download it, please share it, and importantly share how you've used it and what else you'd like to see in it. This is an evolving thing. This is like the first version, so yeah, we can co-create this with you, the community. So it just leaves me to say a huge thank you to our panelists for the engaging conversation. A huge thank you to Giovanna, who behind the scenes has been holding everything together for us and so seamlessly and efficiently. And a big thank you to all of you for coming today, all of your insightful questions and discussions and the various resources you've shared. And I hope to see you all again soon next time. Thank you ever so much.